Well, speaking of Washington, we are sure to discuss many of the governor's initiatives on future editions of MiWeek. But now, let's turn to President Obama. In just a few minutes, he will deliver his sixth State of the Union address, this time before a Republican-controlled Congress. The president will announce a number of proposals, one of which likely will not sit well with Republicans. President Obama is expected to make a push for income equality by raising taxes for America's rich and redistributing to the middle class in the form of tax credits. Also, the president would use the tax hike to make community college free for 2 years for students who maintain a 2.5 GPA. And Obama wants Congress and local governments to back his plan to allow workers to earn up to a week of paid sick time a year. So to help us sort out the president's agenda and challenges, we are joined tonight by Dr. David Dulio, associate professor and the chair of the political science department at Oakland University. He's a frequent contributor to the media on all things political. Welcome to MiWeek, Dave. It's good to see you.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you all.
You know what? I love, prepping for guests when we have on here. So, of course, I had to Google you, and I pulled up on ratemyprofessors.com.
Oh, there we go.
It said Dave Dulio is the man, and he's a great professor. And it also says that you do a great Bill Clinton impersonation.
I do. But don't tell Hillary.
So I figured I had to bring that up because I'm like, all right, so we've got the right man for the job to come on and talk about the state of the state. And apparently Nolan does a really good one, too. All right, so when we talk about the State of the Union, how relevant is this speech anymore, Dave? Let me ask you.
I think it's relevant, but I think that this one in particular may be less relevant than many in recent history, especially for this president. I think that and I'll put it in this context. You all were talking about maybe how the speeches would be similar tonight, and I couldn't help but think how they'd be vastly different, and I'll say in 3 ways.
That's where Nolan.
3 ways: tone, context, and content. And in terms of tone,
everything, Dave.
It is pretty broad, isn't it?
Dr. D, you come sit over here.
You're on the wrong side of the table.
And all those get to why I think it's less relevant for the president in terms of tone, and this may be the least relevant of why it's irrelevant, but he's just a different kind of speaker than the governor. And
he's a better speaker.
He's tremendous, you know.
He uses the prompter. The governor does not use a prompter.
He is a campaign style, and you'll see that as he leaves and hits the campaign trail tomorrow to talk about these things. He will speak in campaign tones. Right. The governor gave a CEO style speech. He just ticked things off almost in an emotionless way. Yeah. In terms of environment, I think it really does cut down on how it's relevant for the president versus the governor. He is speaking to a Republican Congress. He knows that many, if not every one of those things he mentions tonight, that you mentioned several of them, aren't going to fly and that aren't going to get done.
So it's performance art. I mean, he's throwing this out there.
In a way,
it's performance out there. He's trying to maneuver the Republicans into a position where they say have to defend tax cuts for the rich or protect the rich from tax hikes, and stop giveaways to the middle class and poor. He's maneuvering them into a very difficult political position. He knows these things won't pass.
But I think there's no question, and that's part of the job in Washington, right? It is a political environment. He's got to do that.
But when do you get things done? When do you govern?
But here's the other thing that I think he accomplishes partially with this speech is refocusing attention on this idea of the opportunity agenda. And that's where I think the similarity, and I didn't mean that they were giving the same speech, but that they dovetail on that issue, and that is a real issue. You talk about the wealth gap. Nobody disagrees anymore that there's a problem with income inequality in this country. They may disagree about what needs to be done about it or how active government should be in fixing it or not fixing it. But that is part of the agenda. We've had this tremendous recovery on Wall Street and in corporate boardrooms. It is not translating to people in the middle class.
Hang on, Nolan. Hang on, Nolan. I want to jump in here and say I don't agree that it's performance art, but I do think it's very interesting that maybe for American Americans, the speech is no longer a must-watch thing because you're hearing the president bring out a lot of these initiatives before the State of the Union now and kind of float them around way before that. It's no longer this one speech where people are sitting down to watch and to listen and to say, aha, now this is what he's got going on for the next year.
Estimates are that about 30 million people will watch tonight. And that's down from 50 million at its height in the Reagan years, first Bush years, and the Clinton years. But there are other folks that are going elsewhere, right? They are watching online. And I saw today that the White House is doing a streaming version of the speech along with some flashy graphics that are going to flash right up before aside from the president. And they're definitely trying to reach a broader audience, but maybe in a different way, with different mediums moving forward. And just look at who is going to do the interview with the president after the speech. A YouTube channel person is going to interview him rather than a longtime Washington establishment journalist. You know, they are moving in a different direction.
All right, Nolan, go ahead.
You've got a new Congress, a new congressional leaders, new dynamic in Washington, and instead of striking a new tone and coming there and putting on the table at least some programs, some ideas that they can agree on and reassure the American people that there is some hope of getting something done in Washington, he's put on a whole host of programs that Congress will never pass. What is the point of that? What message does that send to the American people? And is he simply doing this to put Hillary in a better position?
It's tough because I wrote right after the election that I thought that maybe 2015 would bring more ability to compromise and more and end to gridlock, really, because that you have this, instead of a divided Congress where the House acts and the Senate doesn't and the Senate acts and the House doesn't, we had hundreds of pieces of legislation were passed by the House and sat in the Senate and vice versa. And they never got to the president's desk. I kind of thought that we might be in a position where we see the Congress get together, because they're both Republican controlled, and send the president a bunch of bills. But there was a chance for a poison pill, and I think that happened. At the end of last year, the president signs the immigration executive action and really sticks his thumb in the Republicans' eye. And has done that moving forward. Well, the Republicans have too. They have come out from the first week of that Congress and passed things that they know the president's going to veto. And it's been this back and forth of sticking their thumb in each other's eye again and again and again that is going to lead to more of the same gridlock. It looks like moving forward.
I wouldn't agree that he's putting things on the table, all of which Congress would oppose. Expanding family leave, for instance, is something that cuts across a wide swath of the American public. It's been tried in several states where it has not hurt business the way some conservatives feared that it did. It's a reasonable thing to talk about. Everyone's going to focus on the tax increase and the tax cuts for middle class, because that's the thing that they can sort of grab on and say, see, it's the same old stuff. But there's a lot of stuff that he's putting on the table tonight, and it's not all the same old agenda that we can't agree on.
So what can they agree on then, Nolan? Because people are looking for at least some agreement.
I mean, they could agree on Keystone if he would bend just a little on that. They could agree.
All he's saying is wait till it's done.
He's been saying wait for 6 years.
You got to wait for the
They could agree on the trade authority bill if they would talk about that. They could do some things to signal the American people that they're not hopelessly. And they might have agreed on immigration.
2 years.
They might have come to some kind of a compromise had he given them the new Congress that chance, but he refused to do it. He gave the new Congress not one day. He moved before they took office.
Because it's the same as the House that was standing in the way the whole time.
So now we're going to have more wealth transfer schemes that haven't worked in 6 years. The rich have only gotten richer, and the poor and middle class have gotten poor, despite dozens of new taxes on the wealthy.
But could people feel that the economy is getting a little bit better? Could that be tied to some of the approval ratings for the president is now at about 50%? It was a recent poll. Could that be tied with the way that people are thinking?
It's
Dave?
way above Congress.
Congress is like what, like an 8% approval rating?
16. We talked about this
Doubled.
in great detail in one of my classes today about the approval of Congress, and it's 16, up from a low of 9 at the end of last year.
Right.
So we see Republicans have doubled it.
Right. Wow. Woo.
I don't know if I'm not sure that any improving economy can be tied to the president's approval rating. I think it's been relatively quiet on the national political front in the last 6 weeks or so, and I think people are maybe just forgetting about it, about why they hate American politics so much. And I think once, we might see it go down.
Oh, they'll see it. They'll remember real quick.
Without a doubt.
Dave, one thing we haven't talked much about, and I haven't heard going into the speech much talk about, the world's in a mess. We've got crises everywhere. How much of this speech would you expect to be devoted to foreign affairs?
I'd be surprised if he didn't mention it at least a little bit or devote a section of his speech to it.
Should more be devoted to it?
Well, let's see how much he talks about it, right? I mean, he has to mention ISIS. I think he has to. I think he has to mention trade and internationalization in that way. But the things that have come out, the proposals that have been leaked out of the White House, and they're really smart politically, right? The White House, it's full of smart people and good politicians. We haven't heard anything about that, so we'll see how much of attention it gets.
Let's talk a little bit about this proposal for community college. 2 years community college free if you keep a 2.5 GPA, or 75% paid by the federal government, the other 25 by the state. What do you think of that, Dave, when you heard that proposal come out? It's
hard to be against that. You know, it provides access to education for everybody. I think we're kidding ourselves if we think it's free. And I wonder, too, if there wouldn't be any unintended consequences that would come with that sort of proposal.
What do you mean?
Well, I'm sitting on a university campus, and we are always worried about resources. We're very careful with ours at Oakland University. We're one of the leanest, if not the leanest, institution in the state, and we are very focused on finding students in a competitive world for folks' education choices and retaining those students and keeping them, because all of those initiatives are tied to resources at the end of the day. And I think that if students go to community college and let me say, this is my own opinion, not the university's at all, and I am no...
We've got 20 disclaimers going here, Dave.
I am no expert on university budgets, but it seems simple to me that if students go to community college for 2 years and not to the university, well, that's resources out of the university that's going to have to be found somewhere else. We might see tuition have to increase on those last 2 years.
Would it be better, Dave, to provide more actual support to the community colleges to keep tuition low rather than just opening doors and saying, well, it's free?
Well, it's not.
And I also wonder what would, and you got into this a bit in the last segment or a couple segments ago, what is the focus going to be of those 2 years? Is it to prep students to go on to a university education, or is it a trade and skills trades?
He was pretty specific about that. This was for specific areas in which there are not enough people being trained right now for jobs that exist. This is not just willy-nilly open the doors, everybody can go. This was a very targeted. Personally, I would have opened it up more than he did. I would send more people to community college or to 4-year because I think it's an investment. I mean, I think that's the side of the market no one ever wants to talk about, is that it pays back.
All right, we have 30 seconds left. Dave, I'm going to give you the last word in the last 10 seconds.
Well, I don't know if I'm not sure how the speech is going to go tonight. I think it's going to be an important one, even though I said it's irrelevant, but it's less relevant. You know, this is the president's chance. I think we can't forget that he's going to talk to the Congress. He's going to talk to the public. This is his chance to try and set the agenda for the year ahead and get public opinion on his side, which it hasn't been for the last several years.
All right, Dave Dulio from Oakland University, thanks so much for joining us. Nolan and Stephen, we're going to see you on Thursday, right? Be sure to stay tuned for President Obama's State of the Union address coming up next. You can't shrug like that. That's going to do it for this special live edition of MiWeek. Thanks so much for joining us. You can find us at MiWeek.org and on Facebook and on Twitter. I'm Christy McDonald. For all of us at Detroit Public TV, we will see you again on Thursday for MiWeek. Take care.